The conference room at Voss Global was dead silent. Every employee sat with their heads down, eyes locked on the table. At the head of the room, Clara Voss, the young billionaire CEO, slammed a stack of documents onto the mahogany surface. "If no one here has a spine, I'll find someone who does." Nobody dared to breathe. In the corner, a man in a worn maintenance uniform was cleaning the conference table. His hands were calloused, his shoulders steady. He paused and looked directly at her. His voice was quiet, but every word cut through the tension. "Then maybe you should start by finding your heart." The room froze. Jack Rowan was 41 years old, and most people didn't see him at all. He wore the same blue maintenance uniform every day. He mopped floors, fixed broken lights, emptied trash bins at Voss Global's headquarters. To the executives rushing past him in their $1,000 suits, he was just part of the furniture. But Jack hadn't always been invisible. 10 years ago, he was a military engineer in the Air Force. He designed navigation systems for rescue helicopters. He had a wife named Sarah, a daughter named Ella, and a future that felt solid. Then Sarah got sick. Cancer, fast and merciless. She died 3 months after the diagnosis. Jack left the military to raise Ella alone. The pension wasn't enough, so he took the first job that offered flexible hours. Maintenance work, night shifts, anything that let him be there when Ella woke up for school. Now Ella was 10, smart, kind, with her mother's smile. That smile was the only thing that kept Jack going on the hard days. And there were a lot of hard days at Voss Global. Everyone whispered about Clara Voss, the Ice Queen, the billionaire who built a logistics empire before she turned 30. She was ruthless, brilliant, and terrifying. Jack had seen her reduce grown men to tears in the hallway. He'd watched her fire people over minor mistakes, her voice cold and cutting. She never yelled. She didn't have to. The cruelty was always delivered with surgical precision. "Your incompetence is exhausting," she told one manager last week. The man had walked out with his box of belongings 20 minutes later. Jack kept his head down. He needed this job. Ella's school tuition, her asthma medication, the rent on their small apartment. He couldn't afford to be noticed by Clara Voss. But he carried something with him every day, a small keychain clipped to his belt loop. It was a tiny pair of silver wings, an Air Force emblem, a reminder of who he used to be, of the man who once believed he could save people. One morning, Jack's supervisor pulled him aside. "We need you in conference room A today. Big executive meeting. Just stay quiet, clean up, don't make eye contact. Clara Voss will be there." Jack nodded. He'd done this before. But as he pushed his cleaning cart down the marble hallway, something felt different, heavier. Through the glass walls of the conference room, he could see them gathering. 20 executives in tailored suits, their faces tight with anxiety. And at the head of the table, Clara Voss, flipping through a presentation with a look of pure contempt. Jack entered quietly, started wiping down the far end of the table. Clara didn't even glance at him. The meeting began. Within 5 minutes, the temperature in the room dropped. Clara tore apart the marketing team's quarterly report. Her words were sharp, personal, designed to humiliate. "You call this work? My dog could do better. And my dog is dead." One woman's hands were shaking. A man stared at the table, his jaw clenched. Nobody spoke. Nobody defended themselves. Jack kept cleaning, but his chest felt tight. He'd seen this before. Boot camp sergeants who broke soldiers for sport. Officers who confused fear with respect. Then Clara turned. Her eyes landed on him for the first time. "Clean faster," she said coldly. "Or at least look useful." Something inside Jack snapped. Not anger, something quieter, something older. The part of him that used to pull people out of burning wreckage. He stopped cleaning. He straightened. And he looked right at her. The room held its breath. Jack Rowan, the janitor in the worn uniform, was staring directly at Clara Voss. No one stared at Clara Voss. She tilted her head, her expression shifting from annoyance to something sharper. Dangerous. "Excuse me," she said quietly. Jack set down his cleaning cloth. His voice was calm, steady, the way it used to sound when he gave orders during emergencies. "I said, I look useful enough to tell when someone's hurting people to hide the fact that they're hurting inside. The silence was deafening. One executive's pen slipped from their fingers and clattered onto the table. No one moved to pick it up. Clara's face flushed, not with embarrassment, with rage. What did you just say to me? Jack didn't flinch. He'd faced worse than angry billionaires. He'd held his wife's hand as she took her last breath. After that, nothing scared him. You heard me, he said, and so did everyone else in this room. Clara stood up slowly. Her chair scraped against the floor, the sound like a knife on glass. You're fired. Jack nodded. He'd expected that. Okay. That one word seemed to catch her off guard. She was used to people begging, apologizing, scrambling to save their jobs. But Jack just looked at her with something close to pity. You can fire me, he said quietly, but you can't fire the truth. And the truth is, you can't hurt me worse than life already has. But these people, he gestured to the executives around the table, you're breaking them every day. And for what? So you can feel powerful? Clara's hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against the table. Get out, now! Jack picked up his cleaning supplies. But before he left, he said one more thing. You know what real strength is? It's not tearing people down. It's building them back up after the world's already tried to destroy them. You should try it sometime. He walked out. The door closed behind him with a soft click. For 10 long seconds, no one in that conference room moved. Then someone started clapping. It was David Chen, the junior analyst who'd been publicly humiliated 3 months ago. His applause was slow, deliberate. One by one, others joined him. Not everyone. Some people were too afraid. But enough. Clara looked around the room, her face pale. Then she grabbed her phone and left without another word. But someone had recorded the whole thing. The conference room had cameras for security purposes, but one of the IT staff, a woman named Priya, who'd been crying in the bathroom after Clara screamed at her last month, pulled the footage. By lunchtime, the video was circulating on the company's internal Slack channel. By the end of the day, it had been shared 5,000 times. The comments poured in. Finally, someone said it. I've been working here 6 years and I've never seen anyone stand up to her. This janitor has more courage than our entire executive team. Who is he? We need to protect this man. The video showed everything. Clara's cruelty, Jack's calm defiance, the way his voice never rose but somehow filled the entire room. And people noticed something else. In the footage, just before Jack spoke, you could see the small silver wings on his keychain catching the light. Someone did a search, found out Jack was former Air Force, found out his wife had died, found out he was raising a daughter alone while working night shifts. The narrative shifted fast. This wasn't just a janitor talking back to his boss. This was a man who'd lost everything, who worked 2 jobs to support his child, standing up for people who were too afraid to stand up for themselves. By the next morning, the video had leaked outside the company. Local news picked it up, then national news. Janitor confronts billionaire CEO in viral video, read the headlines. The board of directors at Voss Global called an emergency meeting. Clara was summoned. They didn't fire her. She owned too much of the company for that, but they delivered an ultimatum. Step back from day-to-day operations. Take a leave of absence. Get yourself together, because right now you're a PR nightmare and a liability. Clara left the building through the parking garage to avoid reporters. She sat in her car for an hour, staring at nothing. Her phone buzzed constantly. Lawyers, publicists, board members. She ignored all of them. Instead, she opened the video, watched herself through the eyes of the world, and for the first time in years, Clara Voss felt something she'd spent a decade avoiding. Shame, not because she'd been caught, but because Jack Rowan was right. She was hurting people because she was hurt, and she didn't even know how to stop. Meanwhile, Jack cleaned out his locker at Voss Global, collected his final paycheck, and went to pick up Ella from school. How was work, Dad? Ella asked, climbing into their old Honda. Jack smiled. Interesting day, sweetheart. Interesting day. He didn't tell her he'd been fired. He'd find another job. He always did. But for the first time in a long time, Jack felt something close to peace. He'd stood his ground. He'd told the truth. And even if it cost him everything, at least he could look his daughter in the eye and show her what integrity looked like. Would you risk your job to stand up for what's right? 3 days after the video went viral, Clara Voss's world was falling apart. The board had stripped her of operational control. Her face was on every news channel, and not in a good way. Hashtags like toxic boss and billionaire bully were trending. But the worst part wasn't the public humiliation. It was the silence in her penthouse apartment. Clara sat on her white leather couch, staring at the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. 43 stories up, the people below looked like ants. She'd always liked that view. It made her feel powerful, untouchable. Now it just made her feel alone. Her phone rang. Her publicist. "Clara, we need to do damage control, a public apology, maybe a donation to a workers' rights charity. We can spin this." Clara hung up. She didn't want to spin anything. She was tired of spinning. For the first time in years, she let herself think about her father. David Voss, fighter pilot, her hero. He died when she was 16. Engine failure during a routine training flight. The investigation said it was mechanical error, but Clara always wondered if someone had checked better, if someone had cared more. After he died, her mother fell apart. Clara had to grow up fast. She built Voss Global in his memory, pushing herself and everyone around her to be perfect. Because perfect meant safe. Perfect meant people didn't die. But somewhere along the way, she'd forgotten what her father actually taught her. "Take care of your crew, Clara," he used to say. "A good leader lifts people up. A bad one just stands on their shoulders." She'd become the bad one. Clara grabbed her laptop and searched for Jack Rowan. It wasn't hard to find him. The internet had done its work. She found his service record. Air Force, engineering specialist, honorable discharge. She found his wife's obituary. Sarah Rowan, beloved wife and mother, died of cancer. She found a local news article about a school fundraiser where Jack had volunteered to fix broken playground equipment. There was a photo of him with a little girl, his daughter Ella. She had his eyes. Clara closed the laptop and cried for the first time in a decade. She cried for her father, for the employees she'd hurt, for the person she'd become. And then she made a decision. She needed to find Jack Rowan. It took 2 days of searching. He wasn't at Voss Global anymore, obviously, but she tracked him down through the school fundraiser article. He was working maintenance at Riverside Elementary, Ella's school. Clara drove there herself. No driver, no assistant, just her, in jeans and a plain sweater, feeling more exposed than she'd ever felt in a boardroom. It was evening. The school was mostly empty. She found Jack in the cafeteria, mopping the floor. He looked up when she walked in. His expression didn't change. "Ms. Voss?" "Jack." She stopped a few feet away, suddenly unsure. I came to return this." She held out her hand. In her palm was the small silver keychain with the wings. He'd left it behind in the conference room that day. Jack stared at it, then at her. "You drove all the way here to return a $5 keychain?" "No," Clara's voice cracked. "I drove here because I owed you an apology and because I needed to understand how you did it." "Did what?" "How you stayed human after losing everything." Jack set down the mop. He looked at the keychain in her hand, then took it gently. "What makes you think I lost everything?" Clara's eyes filled with tears. "I read about your wife. I can't imagine." "Then don't." Jack's voice was firm but not unkind. "Don't imagine my pain to make yourself feel better. If you want to understand, listen." Clara nodded, wiping her eyes. Jack sat down on one of the cafeteria benches. After a moment, Clara sat across from him. "My wife died," Jack said quietly, "and it broke me. For a long time, I was angry. Angry at God, at the doctors, at the universe. I took that anger to work, snapped at people, pushed everyone away." He looked down at the silver wings in his hand. "One night, Ella asked me why I was always sad. She was 6 years old and she asked me if I was sad because of her. And I realized I was teaching her that love meant pain, that loss meant becoming cruel." Clara's throat tightened. "So I made a choice," Jack continued. "I could let grief turn me into someone my wife wouldn't recognize. Or I could honor her by being the man she fell in love with. Kind, patient, strong enough to be gentle. He looked up at Clara. You asked how I stayed human? I didn't. I chose it every single day, even when it hurt. Clara's hands were shaking. My father was a pilot, Air Force like you. He died when I was 16. Engine failure. Jack's expression softened. I spent years being angry, Clara whispered. Angry that no one saved him. Angry that the world kept spinning like he didn't matter. I built this company to prove that I was strong enough to survive without him. But I became someone he would have hated. Her voice broke completely. I don't know how to stop being angry. Jack was quiet for a long moment. Then he slid the keychain across the table toward her. My wife gave me this the day I enlisted. She said it was a reminder that I was supposed to lift people up, not shoot them down. Clara looked at the tiny silver wings. I think you need it more than I do right now, Jack said. Not to keep, just to remember. You can still save people. You can still be the person your father raised. But you have to start with yourself. Clara picked up the keychain. The metal was warm from Jack's hand. I don't know if I can. You already did. Jack stood up. You came here. You apologized. That's the first step. He picked up his mop, then paused. You know what my wife told me the day before she died? She said, Jack, don't let this be the end of your kindness. Let it be the beginning of someone else's hope. He looked at Clara with something that wasn't quite forgiveness, but wasn't judgment either. Your father's gone, but his legacy doesn't have to be your anger. It can be what you do next. Jack walked away, leaving Clara alone in the empty cafeteria, holding a $5 keychain that suddenly felt like the weight of the world. And for the first time since she was 16 years old, Clara Voss felt something besides rage. She felt hope. 1 month later, Clara Voss returned to Voss Global, but not as the Ice Queen, as someone new. The conference room was packed. Every employee who could fit was there. Others watched via video link. Clara stood at the front, no notes, no prepared speech. Just her, in a simple black blazer, her hands steady. I owe you all an apology. The room was silent, but it was a different kind of silence than before. Attentive, hopeful. For years, I confused strength with cruelty. I thought pushing people down would make me rise higher. I was wrong, and I hurt a lot of you in the process. She saw faces in the crowd. David Chen, the analyst who'd started the applause. Priya from IT, who'd leaked the video. The marketing woman whose hands had shaken. I can't undo the damage I've caused, but I can commit to doing better. And that starts today. Clara pressed a button on the remote. The screen behind her lit up with a new logo. A pair of silver wings surrounding a heart. This is the Voss Human Project, a foundation dedicated to supporting the families of our employees. Childcare assistance, mental health resources, education scholarships, crisis support for anyone going through loss or hardship. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. And I want to introduce you to the man who will help lead this initiative. The side door opened. Jack Rowan walked in. The room erupted in applause. Jack looked uncomfortable with the attention, but he made his way to the front. Clara handed him the microphone. I'm not good at speeches, Jack said, and several people laughed. But I know what it's like to work 2 jobs to keep your kid fed. I know what it's like to choose between medicine and rent. And I know that sometimes all people need is someone who sees them. He looked at Clara. Ms. Voss saw me, not at first, but eventually. And that changed everything. Clara stepped forward. This man reminded me that power means nothing without decency. That success built on broken people isn't success at all. She turned to the crowd. I'm establishing this foundation with $50 million of my personal money. But more than that, I'm changing how we operate. No more fear-based management. No more humiliation. We're going to build a company where people matter. The applause was deafening now. In the front row, David Chen stood up. Then Priya, then others one by one, until the entire room was on its feet. Clara looked at Jack. He gave her a small nod. Guess you found your heart after all, he said quietly. Clara smiled, really smiled, for the first time in years. Maybe it was right under my pride all along. After the meeting, employees lined up to shake Jack's hand, to thank Clara, to share their own stories of hardship and hope. Jack found Ella waiting in Clara's office. She'd taken the afternoon off school for this. "How'd I do, sweetheart?" Jack asked. Ella hugged him tight. "Mom would be proud. Sando." Over Ella's shoulder, Jack saw Clara watching from the doorway. She had the silver keychain in her hand, running her thumb over the wings. She caught his eye and mouthed two words. "Thank you." Jack nodded. Some things didn't need to be said out loud. 1 year later, the Voss Human Project had helped 300 families. 12 employees had gone back to school. 20 kids had received medical care they couldn't afford. 5 people had been pulled back from the edge of financial ruin. Jack ran the community outreach program. He'd discovered he was good at listening, at seeing people the way he'd once felt invisible. Clara had changed too. She still ran Voss Global, but differently. She asked questions instead of making accusations. She learned people's names. She celebrated wins and handled losses with grace. She'd never be soft, but she'd learned to be kind. And once a month, she and Jack met for coffee to discuss the foundation. They'd become something like friends. Tonight was different, though. Tonight was the anniversary of Sarah's death and David Voss's death. They died 11 years apart, but both in September. Ella had suggested the idea. Clara had made it happen. Wings of Hope Memorial Night. They gathered in the park near Riverside Elementary. Hundreds of people came. Employees, families, community members. Each person held a paper lantern with a candle inside. Jack stood at the front with Ella on one side and Clara on the other. "We're here to remember the people we've lost," Jack said, his voice carrying over the quiet crowd. "But more than that, we're here to honor them by being the people they believed we could be." Ella stepped forward, holding her lantern. Inside was a photo of her mother. "My mom taught me that love doesn't end when someone dies," she said, her voice small but steady. "It just changes shape. It becomes the way we treat other people." Clara held her lantern up. Inside was a photo of her father in his flight suit, smiling. "My dad used to say that we're all flying together," she said softly, "and the only way we stay in the air is if we lift each other up." She looked at Jack. "It took me a long time to understand what he meant, but I understand now." One by one, people released their lanterns into the night sky. Hundreds of lights rose, floating up into the darkness like stars being born. Jack stood between his daughter and the woman he'd once confronted in a conference room, watching the sky fill with hope. "You think they can see this?" Ella whispered. Jack put his arm around her. "I think they're why we can see it." Clara stood quietly beside them, tears running down her face, the silver wings keychain in her pocket. The lanterns climbed higher, their light reflecting on the faces of everyone below. And Jack thought about his wife's last words. "Don't let this be the end of your kindness. Let it be the beginning of someone else's hope." He'd kept that promise. They all had. Sometimes standing your ground doesn't change the world. It just changes one heart. And that's where the world begins again. Subscribe if you believe courage and kindness always win, even in silence.